In this video, we're going to be introducing the mole concept. But before we do, let's look at another unit of measurement that we have. The dozen. We all know that a dozen means 12, and we use it to count things. We can have 1 dozen eggs, a dozen roses, a dozen loaves of bread. But it's just a number. It doesn't tell us about volume or about mass. We can have a dozen marbles, and we know that they're going to be lighter than a dozen golden retriever puppies. And a dozen marbles are going to fit in my pocket, but all those puppies aren't. So what does a dozen actually have to do with the mole? Let's look at eggs. A dozen eggs is a perfect size for a family of 4. Everyone can have eggs for breakfast, and there's going to be enough so that mum can make a cake for dessert. But what if your supermarkets didn't sell chicken eggs? They sold you robin eggs instead. So this is a robin egg right here. Now, in comparison, like let's say that's your chicken egg, your robin egg's about that size. So I'm going to need a lot more than 12 robin eggs to feed a family of 4. Like 12 would feed me. You'd make 1 omelette out of that. So you're going to need more to satisfy your appetite. Now, what if the eggs were actually a size of grains of sand? Now, if you're a sand eater, if you eat 12 grains of sand, I don't think it's going to do much good to you. You're not going to notice, you're not going to feel full. You would have to eat like a bucket of sand. Now, the term dozen, or the unit dozen, to measure grains of sand, it's not a good measurement, like 12 little grains. Now, what has this got to do with atoms? Well, atoms are smaller than a grain of sand, and we can't use the term dozen to explain an amount of atoms. We can't say we have a dozen atoms, it's too small. So we need to come up with another unit. And we did, we called it the mole. And the mole has a number attached to it, namely 6.02 times 10 to the power of 23. So basically a mole is a unit, and just like a dozen means 12, a mole means 6.02 times 10 to the power of 23. Now it's a big number, yes, but we're talking about little tiny atoms. So we need a large number like this, and because we're dealing with a lot of them, we can have more than 1 mole. Now, how do we actually calculate a mole? Remember that 1 mole is equal to 6.02 times 10 to the power of 23 number of atoms. And 1 mole is equal to an atom or an element or a compound's formula mass. So let's start with this example. Let's look at sodium over here. Sodium, you go to the periodic table, has an atomic mass of 23. So that basically means that if I get some sodium and I put it on a scale and I measure 23 grams of that, I'm going to get 6.02 times 10 to the 23 number of atoms. That's how many atoms are going to be inside my 23 grams of sodium. Now let's look at sodium chloride. Now remember, if we're going to do it this way, we have to actually add the masses together. So sodium has a mass of 23, and if we look at the periodic table, chlorine has a mass of 35.5. So that gives us a total of 58.5. So if you took your table salt and you put it on a scale and you measured out 58.5 grams of that, you are going to have 1 mole of sodium chloride. Now let's do the same with water. Now there are 2 hydrogen atoms. Hydrogen has an atomic mass of 1, so that's 2 for hydrogen. And oxygen has 16, so that gives us a total of 18. So if I get 18 grams of water, I have 1 mole, or I have 6.02 times 10 to the 23 number of atoms. And this is a great way to measure atoms. Now if we have a look at this diagram here, just change pen color, we have a whole bunch of different compounds, elements, and all of them you can see change in volume. So here we have some copper, here we have aluminium, and by the look of them they look about to be the same size. Here we have some sulfur, and as you can see you need to have more sulfur than you do aluminium to get the same number, to get 1 mole. Here we have potassium dichromate, so we need heaps of that to have 1 mole. Here we've got some water, so this must be our 18 grams of water that we calculated over here. And over here we have copper 2 chloride dihydrate. And as you can see, we need a lot more than our 18 grams of water to get 1 mole of this compound. So 1 mole is a standard. It's a unit of measurement, and if you have 1 mole, regardless of the atom or compound that you have, there will be 6.02 times 10 to the power of 23 atoms inside.